We've trained IT professionals from a bunch of companies like Amazon, Meta, Apple, Adobe, Google, and many more. And one of the biggest challenges that IT professionals tend to face when it comes to their communication skills is, I know what I have to say, but during a high pressure situation like a meeting, presentation, or interview, I'm not being able to translate those thoughts into effective speech. And then later on, I go and think, oh, I could have said this, I could have said that. So how do we tend to reduce that block and communicate effectively in situations where it matters the most? There are 3 things that we've seen help IT professionals kill well. And when I say IT professionals, I mean anyone who's in a technical role and needs to translate that technical information to other people. Number 1, the most powerful way to do this is to think in terms of frameworks. One of the main reasons this block between mind and speech happens is because our mind does not know where to go next, and hence we break the flow of our communications. But having a structured framework in our mind which we can utilize in different situations really reduces the chances of us blacking out. Now, there are many of these frameworks, but for example, let's take a situation where your team has gone and presented to a client. The client is not very happy with the presentation and asks you what went wrong. Now, when we're put on a spot like this, we can use a framework called ARA, which stands for Acknowledgement, Responsibility, and Action. Here's an example of this. Hey Neil, I heard that the presentation my team presented to you was not up to the mark. We understand this project is important to you, and the team did spend quite a lot of effort in creating this presentation. But I have read the minutes of the meeting and your feedback points and understand what you need us to do and completely get where you're coming from. I will now personally be involved to make sure all those feedback points are adhered to so that the presentation can be revised up to your expectations. Lastly, if you would allow us, I would love to make the changes and come back to you by tomorrow end of day with a revised presentation, which should hopefully exceed all your expectations. We acknowledge what happened and empathize with them. We take responsibility for it and finally give them the way forward that would enable us to rectify what we might have done wrong. Point number 2. One big challenge that tends to plague IT professionals is, how do I explain technical things to non-technical people? And this is where storytelling can really come to our rescue. We're sometimes so tuned towards speaking a technical language, we might forget that the other person is not used to that jargon. So how do we use storytelling to tackle this challenge? There's a subset of storytelling which most of us know of called analogies. And that can come really handy here. Let's take a very basic example and say we have to explain the concept of coding to someone who doesn't understand it. In this case, we can use a cooking analogy. So to explain this, we can say, let's say if you're a cook and you're given a recipe. The recipe is written in English, which is the language that you understand. Then you're given step-by-step instructions on what you need to do to produce a particular result. You might need to get a bunch of ingredients together and taste things as you make them to understand if you need to adjust the salt or anything else. Similarly, coding is the language for computers, and we give them a set of instructions to produce a particular result. We also might have conditions that if something goes like this, then the computer can respond in a particular manner. So similarly, how a recipe can get a result for a particular food item, coding can show a result on a computer, like creating a website or an application. And we can use analogies like these for any situation. However complex the matter is, always supplement it with an analogy, especially if you're talking to non-technical folks. And the last point that we can utilize to reduce this blockage is to control our voice and tonality. Many times if you're unsure of what to say, our mouth might start saying, and to reduce that, we need to control our voice. That consists of 4 elements: your intensity, pitch, rate, and inflection. We've done a whole video on how you can control your voice more effectively to not only reduce the mind-to-speech block, but to make you sound more engaging, and you can check out that entire video right here.